So let me begin by doing a little bit of intro. And first of all, I wanted to welcome everyone to this session this evening. Hopefully you're in the right place. It's wonderful to be able to host Heather Berthoud, who is an organizational effectiveness consultant who's done so much work on the issue of organizations understanding themselves and being able to deliver the things that they want to deliver. And she, in terms of her bio, it says that she combines a passion for social justice with a focus on practical, results-orientated work, so leaders and organizations can accomplish their goals, learn and enjoy. So it's great to be able to have Heather here this afternoon, and if you're here to listen to her. This is going to be a participative session, so we hope to give people the opportunity to have to enter into their own discussion around some of the ideas that Heather is going to be presenting today. And I just wanted to say that this event is gratefully sponsored by Kaluz Gulbenkian and Barakabri Foundation Trust. Oh no, perhaps it's just Barakabri Trust, just added the foundation as part, it's also part of the PAT Pioneer Programme. So hello again, I'm Joy Warmington, I'm from BRAP. I'm going to try and facilitate ourselves through this evening. You may be here because you've heard how fabulous Heather is, or you might be here because you're a member of the Equality Republic, which is a movement that we are facilitating at BRAP to support the engagement of individuals and organisations who are very keen to transform what we do in the name of equality and human rights, recognising that much of what we've done hasn't made the impact that we want it to make. And it's a movement that's trying to expose people to new ideas, expose people to challenge, but also to ultimately raise the bar so that we can really begin to deliver things that make a difference to people's lives. So that's really the context for this work. So you're all very welcome. I'm going to hand over to Heather, who's actually going to not only take us through, but also do her own slides. So Heather, is there anything else you want me to say by way of introduction? I've missed out the fabulous bits of your bio which tell me that you're a faculty for the American Masters in Organisational Development, because I felt like I should add that in as well. So without further ado, let us hand over to you, and really looking forward to what you have to say.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you. Greetings from the outside of Washington, D.C. One of the lovely things about this time in,
Hi, can you
in
bring
our lives
the corridor quickly?
is that we get to visit so easily. I just have to click on, and here I am with you across the ocean. So that's lovely. And one thing that I will say that you won't know from my bio, but that I have a soft spot for the UK because I was born there. And so I'm and currently in the process of doing quite a bit of research on various diasporas. My family is from Jamaica. They went to England. They've been in the UK. They've been in the US. They've been in Canada. So, like, you know, what does all of that mean for me personally? So that's been a fun exploration. And so I'm grateful to join with you even for a little bit. So let me dive in and just say a word about this model, the diversity diamond. First off, it was created about 10 years ago now. So even the language of it is a bit dated, right? So people are calling things, what we would have called diversity has now been is being called a whole lot of things. Diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, anti-racism, anti-oppression work, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. So the languaging of even what it is we're talking about is shifting, but I think that's because we're struggling to encapsulate all of what we mean, not because what we actually mean has changed. So the idea of sort of belonging and inclusion and making the space available for everybody is really important. And a word about how this model came about. So I was doing some consulting. No, it's more than 10 years, it's 20 years. Oh God, time flies. So about 20 years ago, consulting to a civic engagement organization that is trying to figure out how can they be more inviting to the myriad people of color that they are not inviting to. And one of the sort of leaders of the organization looks at me and says, well, Heather, what do Black people want? And in about that tone. And I thought to myself, I'm not answering that question, first off. But it was really striking that what they were asking for was much more like like a tour guide, how do we say what we need to say to those people so that we'll be understood, right? And we were like, my colleague and I were saying, yeah, that's not what this is about. And so we tried to think about, well, when we say we're doing diversity work, what do we mean we're saying? So that's the genesis of this. So I'm going to start then sharing my slides, and let's get on with that. Here we go. Make sure you can see them. All good? Everybody can see what they're supposed to see? Right? Okay. So what we have is the diversity diamond starts with 2 axes, because if you're in the field, you need a 2x2. And so the vertical axis starts with, are we focusing at the individual level, or are we focusing at the organizational level, right? So that's the first one. The horizontal axis then asks, are we looking either internally or are we looking externally, right? And so now we've got our 4 quadrants, and each of them then is defined. So the first quadrant, which is internal focus at the individual level, is about self-awareness. And what do we mean by that? So self-awareness then is about the awareness of our own differences and our own biases and preferences, and everybody has them, right? So it is not about necessarily ridding ourselves of them, although sometimes that does happen. But it is about at least acknowledging that they're there so that we can take action appropriately, right? So it means we understand our own background, our own values, and our own vision, our own beliefs and assumptions and behaviors, right? So, when am I afraid? When am I forthcoming? When am I, under what circumstances and with whom? Is it easy for me to have conversation? Who do I assume is like me? Whether or not they look like me, right? But who do I have some affinity with? And where do I think, oh, how am I going to talk to them, right? Or, ooh, they got mad at me and now I can't be in real conversation. So it's about looking at our own biases and then taking responsibility for how we contribute. No, that, well, sometimes I've said things that aren't exactly smart. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person, but it does mean that I get to acknowledge that, acknowledge my impact, and then go make amends and try to sort things out. So the first area is self-awareness. The next one, if we're looking at the individual focus, at the individual level and with an external focus, it's how do you and I interact, right? So that's what this is. And for interaction, what we're looking at is how do we engage with people who are of different backgrounds? And that means how do we communicate when we communicate differently? So I see my friend and colleague, Michael. So I'm gonna call Michael out because he can handle it. But one of the ways, for example, when I'm writing to my British colleagues, I remember that British syntax and spelling is different, but my computer doesn't, right? So I get auto-corrected. And I've noticed that since Michael's been in the UK, the messages that come to me have more of a British spelling. I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting, right? But I don't have a need, because I know that, I don't have a need to make corrections. Whereas when I first came to the US, I was corrected. Oh, that's not how you spell. Oh, these things with an OU. Oh, I'll skip, I won't share my trauma stories, but they are there. How do we collaborate when across any differences, right? From the mundane of I like mornings and you don't, to I tend to be more direct in my willingness and ability to confront conflict, and you tend not to. And sometimes that's culturally bound, and sometimes that's personality bound, and it really doesn't matter, because if we're not communicating effectively, we're not communicating effectively, right? So how do we work with that? I need to, Joy, keep me on track for time, because I will get lost in my storytelling. But one story.
You want to know when you've got 5 minutes left, Heather?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. There were two colleagues who were at loggerheads with each other, and one was a Black woman here in the US. She had been in the military. She was very punctual, right? But that had been her style. And she was working with somebody from Central America who had grown up in a rural area, and time, he was in time, he was not on time. Okay, so he frustrated her and she frustrated him. Moreover, he would just walk into her office. Oh, let's have a, it's time for me to talk, let's have, and she was like, wait, you didn't knock, I've got appointments. Like, what appointment? It's time for us to talk. Well, it turned out he had grown up in a rural part of Central America where there were no doors. So he didn't, the meaning of door, like what? It didn't mean anything to him. They needed to know that about each other so that they could then negotiate, well, how are we going to work given this difference, right? The difference doesn't go away, but we can at least negotiate with each other about how we're going to manage that. So then if we go up, and we're now in the organizational focus on the inside, an internal organizational focus, we're talking about organizational culture. And a lot of times people who want to do diversity work want to do it here. They want to do internal organizational work. And that is about looking at the internal workings, right? And that it's anything from formal and informal procedures, systems and policies, talent recruitment, retention, development, the working climate. And what I think about of whose rules rule, right? And what I mean by that is if you get there first and you set up the organization, chances are you set it up the way that works for you, and then other people come in and follow along. And once that becomes sort of cultural, racial, ethnic, then you can start to see, oh,
recording in progress.
This is how we do things around here. And we've forgotten that those rules are culturally informed, right? So in the previous example, I said, one of the participants was in time and the other one was on time. And the culture of the organization was much more on time than in time. And if that's not a phrase that makes sense, feel free to stop me and I'll let you know. Anyway, how am I doing, Joy? I've got, I'm about half, okay, good. So, yeah, I'm working with an organization right now that's struggling with this organizational culture piece, because one of the things they recognize is that they are used to taking the lead. And if they want to work with people who are most affected by the policies they want to change, they are going to have to be partners in ways that they're not used to being partners. So they are really in a struggle because they don't even know when they are leading sort of by assumption and by habit, right? Well, you know, we've got to publicize our great work. Well, whose great work is it exactly? Or we need to convene, right? We need to initiate, right? That is their ethos. And if they're going to partner, they can't always be out front. They can't always be the ones that are initiating. And yet when they're not initiating, they feel like they're not doing their job. Even though the strategy and the work they want to do requires that they are collaborative. You can start to see there's a real tension and feel it. You can feel it for yourself when you're trying to change a habit. I don't care what the habit is. Maybe you want to start exercising. Maybe you want to start going to different movies or reading different books. You just know that there's a gravitational pull towards the way things have already been, and trying to create something different is harder. And that's part of the organizational culture challenge. And then the last bit on the 2x2 here is an outside, an external focus at the organizational level, which it now looks at external relations. And I would say for activist organizations, these last two are the places where people really want to work. The early ones like get dismissed as just so much navel gazing. Can be dismissed that way. But what are external relations is about working with the community. And that is about everybody. Whether you call them customers or constituencies, members, vendors, right? Who are you working with and what are you offering them in ways that are shaped by an understanding of the diversity issues that you care about? What's the organization's reputation? And how well does what you do meet the needs of the people you want to work with? right? Like here in the US and maybe in the UK, we're experiencing the Great Resignation, it's called, as people are not going back to work. And it's like, well, and I read a headline that said, if you want people to come back to work, give them better jobs, right? Like, it's a pretty, but if we don't know what that is, then it's going to be hard to do. And so oftentimes in my experience, people, particularly nonprofit and social justice organizations, will focus here. What can we do in the community? What can we provide? What programs can we offer that are going to make a difference? And that's not a bad thing. It's just incomplete, right? So that's the 2x2. And then because, you know, we were ambitious in, we added the bonus, which is the diamond in the middle, which is what gives the model its name, which is about continuous learning. And that says it almost doesn't matter what you do, that all you're doing is learning about what you're doing. And then you use that to inform what happens next. So it means learning from each new interaction and each new program. You tried something, it worked, why did it work? If it didn't work, why didn't it work? And you're always looking for more, right? So in the first story I told about the client that said, what do Black people want? The backstory of that was they had done this project where they did this big recruitment push, and they invited in and got in a number of sort of urban and people from urban areas and people of color into an organization that was primarily white, middle class, and suburban based, right? So they're very excited. They've done the recruitment, they've got new members, and then they see the drop off and they don't understand why. And when we pushed, what became clear was, yes, they had invited people, but they were having their meetings in the suburbs where the existing members were quite comfortable, but where there were no mass transit, right? Mass transit wasn't available, and childcare wasn't available. So the people that they recruited had no way of engaging with the organization beyond that initial sign up. So what do they learn if they're willing to go, okay, we tried that and it you know, something worked, but then something didn't work. What else do we need to do? So the model basically says you're never done, which is like a spoiler alert for those of you who want to figure all of this out. You're never done. You do something in the organizational culture. There's a group I'm working with right now. It is the most diverse organization I have ever seen. I mean, I'm telling you, they have people from all over the world. So they are diverse, but they aren't quite yet inclusive, right? So they're like, well, what does that even mean? And so now what we're examining is, how does the organization make decisions? How do they involve people in decisions that affect them? What are the councils that they set up, right? And when they think of inclusion, what are they actually thinking of? Are they looking, you know, are they counting numbers and representation, or are they actually looking at the different ways that people think relate to whatever the topic is, right? So people aren't pigeonholed. Oh, Black people like this, so we need 3 Black people on that task force, right? I can tell you my own horror stories of organizations that have been trying to diversify, and they've said, oh, Heather, you're Black. Why don't you come and join us on the this is, I'm not overstating. Join us on the outreach committee to Black people. Like, I don't think you know who I am. Like, that is not what I want. I don't want to do that, right? I could, but it wasn't for that organization. That was not my interest. And so they had not spent the time to figure out what matters to me so that I could be included in ways that were meaningful. They were still sort of at a very surface, here's what she looks like, therefore here's what she must be able to do. Can you see that? So that is the diversity diamond.
So thank you, and thank you for that really clear articulation of the model and the examples you've given as well to help us to actually understand what it means in kind of real world, real time. Are there any questions? We wanted to maybe put you into some groups to have a bit of discussion, but if there are any immediate questions before we do that, we'll be happy. Well, I would be happy to field them for Heather.
You can put them in the chat.
And if you do have questions, then just please either put them in the chat or come off mute and speak out. We're happy either way. Or if you're a bit shy, we might get you in the...
I think you might have a question from Ellie. Is that right, Ellie? You're off mute.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. That was really interesting, and recognise what you're saying about particularly about how different forums have different sets of rules, as it were. And if you're not there when the rules have initially been made and been one of those who established what the rules were, then you obviously need to go in relatively cautiously and find out what the rules are and just listen. Do a lot of listening, active listening. And I suppose I've found that difficult because I work in education, and we're doing a piece of work about improving the outcomes for Black and ethnic minority boys. I've set up my own task group, which has got a number of representatives from the Black African community, including supplementary schools and head teachers and all that sort of thing. But then so I was part of setting up those rules. Then I go into the African Heritage Alliance, for example, to discuss what progress we've made, or to talk, just to talk about the direction of travel. And the difficulty I have there is I'm the only white person in the room, and I represent a very white organisation, and quite understandably, the people in that room have got years and years of historic sort of emotions about a white person coming into their space and about what we have failed to achieve in the past. And so I'm just wondering whether you've got any tips for somebody. I mean, my only way of dealing with it is to turn up regularly, to listen a lot, and to be, and pick my moment in terms of where I contribute. What do they want from me? But I'm just wondering whether there's any other sort of broader tips if you weren't there at the time that the rules were set up.
Well, my curiosity is, before I answer, what are you noticing about your effectiveness so far? Like, what's working in what you're doing?
We are doing partnership, but there's a lot of shuffling of, well, this should be your responsibility. Well, we haven't got the resources in a local authority to do the things that we once did, and so there's a managing of those expectations. It has been positive. I mean, we've been doing it for about a year now, and we have managed to set those rules. But the difficulty I have is really getting thrust behind a work stream where I have no income or funding source to do that, and so it is done on a voluntary capacity, and that is tricky.
There's tons of what in what you said. So if I were going through the you can use the diamond in this way. So go through each of them, like what are you aware of, right? So you talked about your own awareness of your presence and how you're seen, right? You've talked a little bit about how people engage with you based on their awareness and their expectations of you. You've talked about the difference between the institution that you represent and the organizations that you're working with and their different cultural expectations. And you've got a program that you're trying to advance. And I'm not quite sure where that is initiated, but it's also then influenced by all those other factors, right? I would say that the work in this instance is just to name that, like to be able to say, you know, we're working at all of these different levels, right, with all these different challenges, and then give you and each other some permission to just be slower than you think it's gonna. Like everything takes longer, even when you take that into account, and that the relationships that you build based on that honesty, right, and the acknowledging will serve you. But in this work, it is always go slow to go fast. It just takes time. I see Carolyn has a hand up. Yeah.
Hi, Heather. Thank you. That was really helpful, especially your storytelling around each of the quadrants. I think that's really useful in bringing that to making that very real. My question is around that first individual focus and internal focus of self-awareness. Can you give any examples, sort of good or innovative practice, whether that's training? I know it's got to be continuous, but is there any way you can point us where that's done well?
The things that come to mind are, one, don't stop, because there's always more. And the example I often give is when 9/11 happened here in the US. I was at a loss because here I thought I was doing this work and realized that I had not been paying attention to religion as in Islam, right? And sort of the ethnic religious community of Muslims, particularly from the Middle East. And I remember I was at my computer trying to go into one of my support groups and ask a question about, I don't know what I don't know, right? Help me out here. And at about 30 minutes in of trying to craft this email, realizing I was trying to look good more than I was trying to learn, right? It's like, oh, let me look like I know what I'm talking about, even though I don't know what I'm talking about, but I can say I don't know what I'm talking about in a way that will make me look good, right? Like it was that kind of, finally I was just like, ugh, forget. So I wrote this email. I've just been sitting here for the last 30 minutes trying to make myself look good on something I know I look bad about. So like, forgive me and help me out, right? But it's to know, but the self-awareness is the noticing at the 30-minute mark, right? And so I will tell you that the practices that I have found useful, and this is not exhaustive, but I have a regular meditation and journaling practice. I have support groups where this is the topic. I make sure that at least once a year or two, I'm taking a workshop or a course on it. I have my reading lists and groups, right? So it's ongoing. And then there's like, what do you like? You know, maybe what you like is movies and, you know, a discussion group with your buddies, right? And that, or you like going out, right? I am your garden variety introvert. So all the things that I like tend to be solo practices, right? Internalized practices, but I don't make them out to be the only way to do it, but just do it.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, and then let that be part of your learning. Oh, I tried that, I didn't like it. I tried that one, I got a lot out of it. I like, you know, I tend to like sessions that are ongoing as opposed to one-offs, right? Like whatever you will know, and then just keep doing it. It's rich. It's a rich and unending vein.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Heather. And thanks for your question, Carolyn. I thought maybe we could try just get you into some groups to engage with the material, and Heather has kindly done a bit of a sort of summary of the model, which Lashna's put in the chat. You should be able to pick it up, I hope, and open it. And we've got some questions for you. Did you want to go through the questions, Heather?
Sure. So a word about the PDF that we'll hope you will download. It basically just says, what's your focus? So within each of the facets of the diamond, it sort of gives some types of actions that people have taken, do take. And so it's not meant to be exhaustive, but it's sort of indicative of the kinds of things you might be doing. Thanks. I think that's Joy doing the sharing, right? So as change agents, there are things you like to do. So sort of take a look at that and see, and just notice, what's your focus? Where do you tend to rest, right? When you have a project or a conundrum or a challenge, what's your go-to? And so take a look at that. And then notice, all right, if I do that, what are the benefits of that, and what are the possible drawbacks of that? Right? What do I gain with that kind of a focus, and what might I be missing with that kind of focus? Right. So that's really the work. And if you want to have a conversation just about your general reactions to what you've been hearing so far, that's fine as well. Right.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Heather. We just wanted to take a couple of reflections into the room, anything that you would like to share with others around your general reactions, or in specific response to the questions that Heather asked around what facets of the diamond do you lead on, what's gained, and what might be missed.
I can just say one thing that came out really strongly for me, and it's almost a bit like a light bulb moment, is trying to change cultural organisation is tough, particularly when you're not actually in charge of the organisation itself, and creating safe spaces for people to make errors and mistakes and to try but not always get it right is really important. And I've struggled with that. I've sort of struggled with, you know, people fearful of saying the wrong thing, and therefore they shut down and don't say anything. They end up not engaging at all. And in fact, actually, I liked what the continuous learning sort of element of that diamond, and sort of say, if you put that at the front and center and the top of what the premise of your meeting, all of your meetings are, we are all here for the right reasons, and we are all here to continuously learn. It actually enables quite a lot more freedom to make mistakes, you know, which we're all going to.
One of the things I was thinking about this was the need for external. I don't know whether you can hear me okay. Yeah, so the need for like external input, because organizations are in the position where they are, not through any, you know, magic. You know, we live in an institutionally racist society. So organizations can't change really internally themselves a lot. You know, that often the majority would sit on the minority and sit on the effort for change. You need something from the outside. Most organizations will, most leaders of organizations will look at external people and go, yeah, I'll listen to what you got to say, rather than the lots of people inside that are saying exactly the same thing. So it's how we cross-fertilize, I think, those external voices going into organizations to drive the change.
Right, consultants will never be unemployed. Right, because one of the things that's often said is you can't be a prophet in your own land, right? So it's hard, even though I've been saying that for years. Like, yes, I know, but exactly right. Other insights, awarenesses.
I think for me, and sorry, I was looking for how to put my hand up, and hopefully I don't sound like a robot like I did in the other group. So yeah, really love this this model. And I'd actually said in the group that I look at it and it's a reflection of my career and my life, really, in terms of the fact that actually to get stuff done, it's not a linear process. You know, often we come in, we start our careers as I see myself very much as a change agent, and you start your career thinking, all right, this is where I need to get to, and it's a straight line journey, or you might have to go off at, you know, at various points in other directions. But actually what this model kind of reinforces for me is the need for us to sometimes come back to where we started and you know, take some time, spend some time in self-awareness, think about how do we get that done, the person I am, how do I get this done in this organizational culture, what do I need to do in terms of modifying my behavior, and what interaction do I need to take, and the real key in all of this is remembering that the learning sometimes is more important than the journey itself. So you know, I love the model, and I just that was my kind of it kind of reinforces that need for resilience, and to come back and do your personal stuff as well as reading the environment and preparing for it and everything else. So yeah, really resonated with me. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments, Jackie. Julian, you had your hand up, maybe, yes?
Yeah, thank you, Joy. Thank you, Heather. I was most struck by something you said when you were presenting the diamond, and I hope I'm not misquoting you, but I wrote down, it almost doesn't matter what you do because all you're doing is learning about what you're doing. And in that small group, I think I confessed that I become increasingly I don't know, I find the organisational culture stuff much less fascinating than I used to at earlier stages in my career. And I think one of the possible reasons of that is the design. I don't know, people thinking that there's a template, or people thinking that there's a set of policies or a set of practices that if we do this, everything will be fine. And I just wondered if you could say any more about that. It almost doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah, I need to be careful because I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm sure it's what I said. It sounds like something I would say and then need to clean it up later. So I think there are different things. Like there are things we want to fix, things we want to see different, things that are, you know, there is real injustice. There is real inequity. There are real problems that need to be solved and addressed, right? So I want to be careful that I'm not dismissing real suffering that's in the world that we're trying to alleviate. So as long as that's clear. But I think what I mean is that because we are operating in so many interlocking systems, any individual action or program is by definition inadequate. We're you know, our job is to put, I think of it lately as I want to put my drop in the ocean. right? I'm not boiling the ocean. I'm not changing a whole lot of things. I'm doing my bit. And when I do that bit, something is going to happen. It's going to splash back at me. It's going to get absorbed. Somebody's going to take it and run with it. Somebody is going to be upset by it. And my job in that moment is to learn from that. Because then I can say, oh, I thought I was doing X and I did it with all these good intentions, but it had a really different impact. What do I want to do with that now? What, is it that my intentions were off, or right? Or that my intentions were not fully understood to myself? Is it that my action was ineffective? And is it ineffective because it's just ineffective action, or is it ineffective because it wasn't timed right? It wasn't done well in this context. It might have worked in that last context, but it won't work in this one, right? So that's the continuous learning that is, I think, often missed when we're trying to fix it and get to the result that we want. And even if you get to the result, something else is going to happen, right? So I'm old enough that I've seen this, I've had a few turns around the sun, or whatever, you know what I'm saying. And there was and I've spent most of my life in the US, so I'm making reference here. There was a civil rights movement that worked on housing and voting and all of that, and it had an impact. Did it fix everything? Absolutely not. And now there's some blowback, and now we're dealing with the ripples of that. All right. And now we're in the next piece, and so we're working on that as best we can, right? There was a women's movement. That's sort of about where I come in, where I enter the stream. And then there was a gay rights movement, and then there was like, wait, no, don't forget bisexual, and then there was, wait, don't forget transgender, and then it was like, wait, don't, so like, and all of that is possible because what happened before, right? So it doesn't mean that it's not so much that it doesn't matter in that it's inconsequential. It doesn't matter in the sense that it's not final.
Sounds to me, Heather, if I can just comment, that you seem to be, there's an advocation from what you're saying about a mindset change, a way that we approach some of this stuff, because we almost get exhausted by this idea of the quick fix.
Yes.
And there's something that we need to be doing very differently in recognition, I think, of what you've said. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I haven't seen this before. Kat Tabner has raised her hand. Oh.
Hi, Heather. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I was a little late. I work in community engagement, and I was at a community event. I was just wondering and curious about slowness, and especially hearing what you were saying earlier about be slower than you think you're going to be and go slow to go fast. Definitely noticing in my team there's been a sudden push to go really, really quick, perhaps to fix things, which I imagine might be perhaps informed by a potential pushback to throw race off the table, potentially. And I just was curious about what you might kind of describe as the qualities of slowness, because we've also noticed internally, some of my colleagues and I are really thinking we need to go slow here. And for us, it's slow as in collaboratively and really thoughtfully. But I was just wondering what you think slow looks and feels like.
So let me ask you back. When you say your colleagues, you and your colleagues are feeling like you need to go slow here, what are you meaning by that?
What we're meaning, I guess, is that because we've had a push from someone else in the team to be working in a particular way, their way, we were actually thinking, hang on a minute, we need to pause and involve everybody in the team in these conversations to really be able to understand how team members, we can individually and collectively meaningfully plan what we're going to do. And so that actually we're also ensuring that all layers of our leadership are taking responsibility as well.
Sounds about right to me. I've got a comment in the chat that says, fast for me as a person of color equates to tokenism, right? And so I think I'm wary of the quick fix, in part because, you know, it's rarely sturdy, right? It's rarely long lasting, but also because the fallout is something like what Danielle is saying, right? That it feels like tokenism. It feels like, oh, hurry up and fix it. Let's put a Band-Aid on it. Let's say we've done it so we feel good about ourselves, which is different from actually fixing anything, right?
Heather, there's a question. I didn't know if you, sorry, finished that comment. There's a question someone sent to me directly because I have an internet problems, but
oh, okay.
Have you finished what you were just going to say? I feel like I might have interrupted you.
So I haven't answered Kat's question. I've commented on her response. So let me just answer that. I think slow is about steady, right? It's consistent. It's not about not doing, it's about doing something always. And I think the kinds of questions that you're asking do slow things down. How are we feeling? What else do we need to know? Are we, right? Are we being precipitous? Are we just like dashing something off? Or is this really considered as best as we know how? And there's a proverb I like. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right, which I understand to be an African proverb, but I don't know from where. And if you're going together, you're going, you know, just try it. I mean, it just takes longer, right? Work with one other person and it just takes longer. Work with 5, it takes longer. Work with a city, it takes longer. It's just how it is.
Sorry, let me read it out. I was just going to say, actually, one of the things I heard was if you want the system to change, you've got to connect it to more of itself. Often yes. It's not connecting to itself. That's right. Angela has sent me something directly. Her internet's not working very well. She said that she thinks you said that activist organizations work in the top 2 quadrants of the diamond. And could you say a little bit more about that, please?
Well, this is my experience, so let it not be taken as universal, right? Universally true. But in my experience, you know, it's the action in activism, right? That what we want to do is fix what is out there, and so that tends to be a focus on programs, projects, products, activities that show to ourselves and perhaps we think to others that we're doing something and making change. And if we can, and so that's the sort of external programs side of things. On the internal culture, then we tend, what I've seen is activist organizations tend to apply their activism to their internal culture. But often then without an interrogation of what's my role in this and how are we collectively creating the thing that we mind, right? that we're objecting to. So without some of the internal and individual focus, we let ourselves off the hook. You know, it's the person who says, I'm not a racist, I'm not a sexist, right? The mansplainer, like, let me tell you about mansplaining, right? Or I'm not racist because, you know, I had somebody say to me once, it's a Black man, said, I don't know why you need to be a feminist. We treat our women well. I was like, there's so many ways I cannot answer this question, right? But that sense of not being aware of how we're contributing is I think, it's starting to change. I'm seeing some shifts in it, but over the time that I've been doing this work, which is now about 30 plus years, it has been more active. Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. That's great. We've got a few minutes left. I don't know whether, I mean, we're getting good value out of you, Heather, some free consultancy here. But just if there was anything that you wanted to say to round us off, Heather. I'm just seeing though, if anybody has got any outstanding questions or comments before I ask you to maybe make some final comments. I think you might be okay to go for it. Yeah.
So the thing that was asked was, what's the impact I've seen from using this model? And I'll say, like, when I go in to organizations, they're often asking, how do we fix this? We need a program too. We need a training, da, da, da. Like, yeah, we're not doing that. I think of this work as so long-term, right? It's long, it has taken us, we are where we are because of the previous 500 years. And that is not an exaggeration, right? That slavery, imperialism, colorism, gender, oppression, like all of it is roughly 500 years old. So whatever we do today is a down payment on the next 500 years, right? It doesn't shift everything all at once, but knowing that that's what we want to do, we can make that difference. And so when I talk to my clients and they're like, oh, 500 years, yeah, that's a long time. I'm like, yeah, right, okay. So, you know, I don't have a magic wand. We're gonna do something and that'll be great. So I spend a lot of time with them trying to figure out what they, not necessarily what they want, but why they want what they want. But what is it that they think is going to be different qualitatively, right? What are the values and aspirations that they're really trying to live into that their preferred program they think will address? And if they can answer that, then that may or may not be the right program, and or we can design it in a way that holds to account in terms of the vision and aspiration, right? So that's the first thing. And the second, I think, is that I go in, my job is not to get them to the end, which as a consultant is a little dicey to do because people think, oh, why'd we hire you? But I think my job is to help them see enough progress that they are motivated to keep going. And if they're motivated to keep going in knowing that, you know, tough stuff's going to happen. It's going to get hard. Somebody's going to disagree with you. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to be offensive when you didn't mean to be. You're going to be offensive when you didn't know you could be offensive in that way, right? You're going to alienate somebody. And then the people that you didn't alienate are going to wonder why those other people, right? Like, it's like, that's just the lay of the land. So what I'm interested in building is sort of resilience and long-term, a long-term mindset, but also then the skills and capacity to do that work. What that looks like can be any number of things. And so I wrote down a few of them. One was an organization where the leadership team decided that what they were going to do was reflection as a group about how they were manifesting the culture they wanted to create and or ways they were not, right? So they were holding themselves to account. That was their continuous learning and holding each other accountable. They could then start to see when were they being effective and when were they not being effective. And then they could create some better feedback mechanisms between themselves and the staff. It's all internally focused because before that, they were just being defensive. Like, we're the good guys. Why are you mad at us? Well, because you're the leaders. Like, that's what happens. Right? So there was that. There was another group where they have decided that what they're doing is ongoing staff learning sessions about, this is an environmental organization. So they are looking at particularly anti-racism, but not only, as it intersects with environmental work. So they're doing, you know, so they're educating themselves on issues of class, of immigration, of race, and you know, it's a self-guided curriculum, and they are loving that. But they're also then looking at how they integrate what they are calling diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice into their program. So they've gone back through all of their programs and said, are we in fact representing ourselves the way we want? Are we advancing our vision here, or are we just doing what we've always done because we've always done it and we didn't interrogate those programs and offerings through this particular lens? And so they're, you know, they're busy. They're doing, they've done that. And they're looking, you know, like, who do we fundraise with? How do we fundraise? Who are our political partners? Who are we in coalition with? What kinds of events are we offering? Like, they're looking at the whole gamut. And then doing some periodic skill development as they identify their work. There's another organization that, what I'd say the big thing for them once they did their sort of vision work, was really learning to have tough and tender conversations when they need to, right? When they disappoint each other, when they are in conflict with their coalition partners, like, how do they actually engage those challenging conversations with some integrity, right? But without necessarily folding over, oh, sorry, you know, so, like, yeah, you can say you're sorry, but would we do it again? Like, why, you know, like, there's something that is, and I think this is particularly true for organizations that are led by the dominant group. In this case, it's a white organization. And so there's now the kind of like, oh, we need to listen to people of color, which is, you know, true, but that doesn't mean you have to fall over when people of color say we mind, right? Like, okay, great, get that you mind. Now that's the beginning of a negotiated conversation. How can we be in community with each other and not just say, okay, we're wrong, and then turn into doormats, right? Like there's something else, something in there. And then a last one is an organization that I've mentioned. They are by far the most diverse organization I have ever seen, certainly in the US. I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. And they are becoming aware that they have mistaken their diversity for inclusion and equity. And they're trying to figure out now, well, what does that mean? So we're in early days, but the language that they're coming up with is recognizing it as a journey. So we, as long as they do something, and it's a largish organization, so they're not going to be as nimble as a smaller organization. So as long as they can articulate some movement to their leadership and to their staff, they feel like, okay, we said we're moving, we're demonstrating that we're moving, great. And they are now at the point of requesting learning resources and beginning to identify a plan to address the needs that are getting articulated. I'd say overall, regardless of what I'm doing, the thing that most of my clients will say they get, and what I'm happy with, is that the continuous learning is what sticks, and that it makes clear that there's really no end, and that everything is connected to everything else, right? So I have a conversation with an individual that turns into a program that has implications for culture. Oh, look, then I hire somebody new and they come in and they've got new interaction skills and we've got to work that out, and they've got ideas for program. Like it's all, right? It sort of pinballs back and forth. And that people feel like that's the point. And we're in for that. We're game to stay in and continuously improve ourselves, continuously learn, and that for me, like, all good. That for me is yay. And I'm happy, right? Because half of the stuff I feel like I don't know anyway. So like, like I didn't know anything about Muslims and Islam. Like, don't call me if you want to call me for that kind of thing. I'm fairly limited, but if we're learning together, then we're good. Yeah. So I hope I've answered the question. I think I did.
You did. You got an A+ on that one. Thank you. I'm delighted that you were able to come and speak to us, and the insights of the connections, I think, between the theory you're using, but bringing it to life with some of those insights. It's just been such really rich learning. So on behalf of us all here, I just really want to thank you for attending and for being here and for sharing what you have with us. I'm really, one of the things that you said was the mistaking diversity for inclusion and equity. And I just think that's interesting, how we don't learn from each other, because actually Britain is very much in that stage now where it thinks if it can do diversity, it doesn't recognize that that's not the same as inclusion and equity. So there's some such important learning, and we would love to have you back and do some more free consultancy for us, Heather. Such a valuable thing. So maybe if we can all put our hands up, if we remember, for Heather, wish her a good where are you? Evening, night, moon, morning? I can't remember what you were now, where you are now.
I'm in midday.
All right. Wish
Smack
you
in
a
the middle
good
of my
rest of
midday.
the day and take care. Thank you all for attending. Wishing you all a really good evening and stay safe and take care. Thank you all very much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.